Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guests are Tobe Johnson and Brett Eichenberger. First, I have a couple of announcements. Forbidden Knowledge News, always available on Rokfin, Odysee, Rumble, all podcast platforms. Check out Rokfin. This is where you get our premium content, as well as all the premium content from every creator on Rokfin for only $10 a month. You can also get a free account and get tons of free content. You just go to rokfin.com/FKN Plus to sign up or use the link in the description. Our website, forbiddenknowledge.news, also the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. You're going to find amazing podcasts from our community there. Today I want to welcome Tobe Johnson and Brett Eichenberger. Tobe is the author of the Owl Moon Lab books and researcher of all things related to Bigfoot. With over a decade of research and his own experiences, he has dedicated his work to investigating the relationship of Sasquatch and the paranormal. He is co-producer of the documentary Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, which is a groundbreaking two-part documentary series that focuses on Sasquatch witness testimony. Brett Eichenberger is an award-winning filmmaker with over 25 years of experience working in the film and video production industry. As a native Oregonian, he has been intrigued by Bigfoot since his childhood years, and this documentary has given him the opportunity to explore the topic in depth. Tobe, Brett, welcome. How you both doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. The topic of Bigfoot is quickly becoming one of my favorites. I didn't really mess with it too much in the beginning, but man, the high strangeness surrounding it now, everything I've learned, I'm all in. And we're going to be talking about your new documentary, A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, which features interviews from researchers and eyewitnesses with amazing stories and evidence, as well as historical accounts of Bigfoot and the significance within the indigenous culture. Now, this is both your first appearance here. Let's start with a little bit more about your backgrounds and what led you to this kind of research and ultimately do the documentary.
So my background is in more traditional narrative filmmaking and commercial filmmaking, and basically I've been doing that for most of my life, going on 25, 30 years almost, since I was a kid actually. And Bigfoot has been something that has been just ingrained in my head, being a native Oregonian since as far as I can remember, going back to childhood. And so knowing that, we had the skills, and when I say we, the collective group of us that made this film, we had the skills to tell this story in a cinematic way. We found an opportunity during the pandemic to go out and just do it. And we'd all talked about doing it for years. We had kind of found ourselves getting into the Bigfoot culture here in Oregon, and we'd met some folks such as Todd Geese and whatnot. And so we knew that we had the connections to do it. And so we thought, it's perfect time to do it. Let's go out and do this documentary and do it differently than what we'd seen before. And that was the most important thing for us, was to do something that had a different slant, if you will. It was more of a traditional documentary that we felt like we didn't really, it wasn't really out there, I guess you could say.
And what about you, Tobe? How did you get into this subject?
Sure. Well, without boring you about my background and school and jobs I've had, around 2005, middle of 2000s, my son and I found a single footprint in the little town of Thurston, Oregon, which got us asking bigger questions about mysteries in the Pacific Northwest. And it turned out that we went to a church with a guy that made a documentary called Sasquatch about Bigfoot, and followed up, pretty much the Roger Patterson and Gimlin footage, and wanted to make a film loosely based on those experiences. But he swore by the existence of the phenomena, and I didn't ever find it difficult to believe. But it got me asking questions about how to find the phenomena, or if it finds you, what an average witness is like. Can they be stereotyped? What's the diversity of this phenomenon? And it's a pretty vast diversity. Although I think after, 15 years, I've kind of narrowed down how to get the best results out of the phenomena. And that's when Brett approached me about this property where we had really good results in the little town of Cottage Grove, Oregon, and the phenomena would present itself on the property. And as far as I know, it still is. So it all begins, with what I would call these extended experiencers, people that live with the phenomena coming down to their backyard Bigfoot. And that's been my experience as far as success rate of having these experiences.
How did you do your research into these experiencers and ultimately find out who you wanted to talk to and place in the documentary?
So that's a good question. Like I was saying earlier, we got to know, folks such as Todd Neese. Both Jill and I, the producer on the film and the writer on the film, both her and I went to a gathering back in 2012. And like I said, we got to know Todd Neese, and, Peter Byrne was there. Ron Moorhead was there. And so, we found their stories very credible. We found their research very credible. And so we started there. And what was great about that was we were able to build on that. We were able to build on their connections. And then about, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 months later, we saw this film, The Alien Bigfoot Connection. And there was a sequence towards the end of the film with Tobe and Daryl's story. And we're watching this going, we've got to talk to these guys, and they're here in Oregon. And so, long story short, we reached out to Tobe, and Tobe has really been instrumental in connecting us with so many wonderful people in this world that have made massive contributions to the film. And I think a lot of these people are fresh faces with a lot of great experience, and a lot of great stories.
Now, I want to ask this mainly for Tobe, but I want to hear your answer as well, Brett. How has your idea of the Bigfoot phenomena and everything surrounding this, has it changed or evolved since you first started looking into it or first gained interest in it?
Yeah, it changed. I'm wondering now if it didn't change me permanently at the DNA core. It seems to have that way with people. It not only changes how you view the small stuff in the world, because, it's such a temporal experience we're having here for about 85 years, all of us. And when you add the addition of a magical, mythical creature existing just right outside of town, that changes you. And so, it's been humbling. It's been fascinating. It's been at times a little bit scary, but for the most part, people have scared me much more than this phenomena has. But it's changed who I hang out with. I mean, I would have never met the likes of you or Brett or...
Well, I kind of really meant, has it changed your idea of what the phenomenon is, of what Bigfoot is, and, is it a lost hominid? Is it some kind of alien? Is it supernatural? Has that changed since you first started looking into it?
It has, yeah. And I don't want to give too much away, but I started in a world of looking at this as just possibly being something merely physical. And there's this whole other category that surrounds this phenomena. Whether or not Bigfoot is supernatural or paranormal, I tend to think yes, and we can maybe talk about that. But for the most part, it's a Sasquatch's world, and if they want to come hang out with you, you can't go looking for them. And that was something no one really ever told me. They have to come to you.
Yeah, that's so interesting. What about you, Brett? Has your feelings or thoughts about this phenomenon changed since you started looking into it?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think it's the whole idea of phenomena in general has changed, because what's interesting was when we first started this documentary, it was originally going to be like the 3 pillars of the paranormal: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts. And come full circle, almost 2 years later, we're starting to realize that it's all connected. And that kind of teases a little bit on what Tobe was talking about as far as the paranormal is concerned. But there's too many paranormal sightings that go along with your traditional Bigfoot sighting that we can't dismiss. It would be unfair to dismiss it, screen the data to dismiss it. Now, with that being said, this documentary doesn't really get into that. It touches on it slightly, but we ended up with so many interviews with paranormal aspect to it after the traditional sighting that we've split this up into 2 documentaries. So the next one will be coming out concentrating solely on that. That will be coming out next year. So yeah, I mean, it radically changed the way that we see the world, our collective group of filmmakers see the world, how we experience the world. And, I mean, that changes every day. It grows and grows every single day.
Now, I understand that there's some actual witness footage in there. Would you be able to maybe describe some of it, or maybe some of the most profound stuff that you've seen, or even some of the most profound stories that you've been told about the Bigfoot without giving too much away?
Yeah, we got to a point where we were about 90% done with the film, maybe even 95% done with the film. And both Jill and I went down to Vernal, Utah to Phenomenon just this last September. And there was a local man by the name of Daryl Wilson that was talking at Phenomenon. He was kind of like in a side room. He wasn't necessarily a featured speaker, but he was a star speaker, I guess you could say. He was more of a kind of a featured speaker, and he was new to this and new to talking about his experience. And so I went and attended his talk, and he was a little rusty, but he put together a good show, and he talked about his sighting up in Western Alaska about 8 or 9 years ago. And what struck me about that sighting, there's a multitude of things that struck me about that sighting. One was that it lasted a long time. It lasted close to 20 to 30 minutes. 2, he had an eyewitness with him that was an Alaskan state trooper, a trained observer. And they watched the Bigfoot, the hairy man is what they call it up there in Western Alaska. They watched the hairy man for, in binoculars close up. Like biologists, observing a moose or a bear in the wild. And it was an extraordinary sighting. And to top that, Daryl was diagnosed with terminal cancer and had 6 to 8 weeks to live. And so he's up there enjoying life and just living life to the fullest, and observing this Bigfoot. And then fast forward a couple of years later, his daughter has almost the same sighting from a plane, and she had her camera with her. And I'm just going to leave it at that. But nobody's, I don't think anybody's really seen anything like this. And it's definitely out of the more traditional Pacific Northwest type Bigfoot experience. It almost, to a certain extent, asks more questions than it answers. But I think that Daryl and his daughter Rachel are 2 of the most sincere people that you're ever going to find who have had these encounters and sightings. And they were both non-believers before.
Anything to add to that, Tobe?
What was the question again?
Just what was your maybe some of your favorite stories or aspects to the documentary that went into it? He just talked about the footage. Is there any other footage that sticks out for you or anything like that?
Well, like Brett said, there's some new voices and new faces in this documentary. And one of the voices that we talked about and faces is that of Doug Meacham, who's a hypnotherapist out of Portland, Oregon, and works with people that have had traumatic experiences of one kind or another to recall those. I think he actually even has a stage show, if I'm not mistaken, where he has an audience, and quite impressive what a man can do as far as hypnotherapy. And as far as I know, he's the real deal. I've seen him work before with people that claim they were abducted or had Sasquatch experiences. And you'll see him interact. Well, I don't think there's any footage of him interacting, doing hypnotherapy, is there, Brett? But he explains it to a degree.
Not in our film, no.
Yeah, he does explain it to a degree to where you as the viewer can understand just, I was thinking about this the other day. When you have a traumatic experience, let's say like seeing a Bigfoot at close range, it's going to go into a category for safety's sake. It's so you can function for the rest of the other things you need to do. However, it's so preserved and so finely tuned that if you have the right tools to access it, it's way more detailed than just your average memory. And so watching Doug work, which I have, to see him be able to fast forward, rewind, and stop it like an old cassette player, and bring out this memory, the smells, the moments that happen there, and to watch the people relive this. To have somebody like that is so new to this topic of talking about Bigfoot. And it's such a pleasure seeing all these new faces in here, because other Bigfoot documentaries haven't had these voices or faces in them. And it's going to be a real surprise for a lot of Bigfooters.
That's great. And now I know you've focused on specific areas for this documentary, but do both of you think that this is a global phenomenon, that whatever these beings are, exist across the planet?
Tobe, you want to take that?
Oh, I think so. The different versions of Bigfoot, as far as description and names for the countries that they're in, but I'm not such a Bigfoot nerd that I don't know the exact names and continents and at the given time here. But for the most part, this is a global historical phenomena where you can trace back the giants of old all the way to pre-scripture even. And why is that? What's going on with the historical evidence that talks about these shunned ones, we'll say, or the wild people that just live right outside of a community or village or town? That notion persists through statues and reliefs and paintings throughout the Renaissance period. And all one really needs to do is look.
Now,
I was going to say, just to extrapolate on that, a lot of people have come up to us and said during the course of the production of this documentary, they've said, so there's more than one, right? It's not just a Bigfoot. It's not just a Bigfoot guy that gets around. And I said, yeah, actually, there's more than one. Not only that, but there's been sightings in 49 of the 50 states. The only state they haven't gotten to yet is Hawaii. So, and I think on the global scale, there's been a sighting on every continent but at Antarctica. So they're out there. They're definitely out there. There's they're just like people, different species, different types, different sizes, but they all have a mysterious to them.
I love it.
I mean, even the Mojave Desert, which is going to be a very tough one, that you could find, a hybrid primate roaming the desert lands of Nevada, Arizona, Utah. But absolutely, these are fabulous sightings that most people don't follow up on just based upon the vastness of the desert. But it's almost unbelievable that you could have something living out there like this.
Now, Brett, you said this is going to be a 2-part documentary. I mean, is that just because of the amount of information going into this and the amount of witness testimony?
Correct. Yes. It was always our intent just to do one film, and our first rough cut was over 5 hours long, and we didn't know what to take out. And so, because it's all really, really important, we feel like if people would take this subject matter seriously, and we feel like they will in this format, they need to hear these stories. They need to see into the eyes of the eyewitnesses, and I think there's an emotional component that really comes through in this film. And we're going to see that in the second documentary too. And there's going to be some wild topics, not for those of us who are interested in the paranormal, but we are hoping that this documentary becomes a little bit of a bridge to the skeptics out there and maybe the hobbyists, if you will, or the people that have a fleeting interest in the paranormal that take a look at this and really start questioning the reality in the world in which they live.
Anything to add to that, Tobe?
Well, no, Brett surmised it pretty well, but it's we live in an interesting time where we have disclosure almost, once a week of one sort or another based upon UFOs, and this parallel between these two worlds, you can't help but see the connections because of the phenomena seem to happen in the same hotspots. But I think that kind of download or the government coming up with a type of Sasquatch disclosure, I think we're far away from it, because we're far away just as researchers from the way they talk and the way they organize. We're not organized like that community at all. It's too much of a gimmick still. So this documentary, though, like I've been telling Brett since day one, is that there's a shift happening with this documentary. I mean, I saw how honest and earnest they were as filmmakers, and the artistry behind telling the story. And so I think this documentary will be a part of that. And I'm not just saying that because I'm involved with it. If I was just a fanboy of it, it will help them move the metrics.
Now, when it comes to the witness testimony that you had, is there any consistently recurring themes amongst all of them? Anything that happens across the board?
That's a great question. I'm kind of scanning through all of them in my head right now. I mean,
or even similarities between a few of them,
Yeah, I mean, there's consistencies with all of them. The fact that people aren't prepared for the size. The other consistency is, I know what a bear looks like, and this was not a bear. And yeah, that still seems to be the quick response by a skeptic. Oh, you saw a bear, there's shadows, a light play. No. These are intelligent people. We've got a police officer. We've got a guy in his late 40s that's been hunting since he was 13 years old. There's that consistency. There's also a lot of, this gets into our second film, a lot of strange feelings, a lot of feelings of people that say that they know that they're not wanted there. They'll get this kind of like hair in the back of the neck standing up, and they'll kind of feel and or hear voices in their head saying, you got to go. We don't want you here. You need to leave. That tends to be fairly consistent, this kind of foreboding feeling. That's not always consistent. Some of these sightings can be very, very traumatic and very frightening, and some of them can be positive. It just depends. But I think it's just kind of really the magnitude of this being is what sticks out sticks out within every single one of the eyewitness reports.
Cool. Anything to add to that one, Tobe?
Yeah, going back to the earlier point, this phenomena, it changes the individuals that have these experiences in a way that bonds a group together, or individuals like Daryl and I, who are weaved throughout the story of Flash of Beauty. And this bond is very similar to people that have, been in war together or something like that, or experienced a miracle together. And of course that shapes and shifts you, but beyond that, the consistency is these people's priorities have totally changed to a degree that it affects their daily lives. It affects where they work, how they work, what their marriage is like. And to see a documentary get into those delicate areas and be able to kind of bring that up and out of people it's just so important, because it's never been done. And it gets into, this whole other category of the supernatural, or let's just call Bigfoot, a mystery. And these mysteries have different layers to them. And this is just one of those layers. But you see that consistency throughout, that these individuals are absolutely 100% affected. You watch them relive this moment in a way that is hardly ever done with, careful editing, and that's been, I haven't met a lot of these people, actually, to be honest, in this documentary. Very few of them, in fact. And so I can tell, though, who they are. I can sense and feel what they're reliving. It's all like we already know one another, and there's very few words that need to be said once we meet one another.
Now, let's get into some of the paranormal aspects as much as you can talk about. First, why did you call the documentary A Flash of Beauty?
So that title came from an interview that we did with this guy that's based down in Bandon, Oregon. His name is Stan. And Stan is kind of a collector of Bigfoot anecdotes. And he was talking about how you'll see one, and in a flash of beauty, they're gone. And we thought, we kept coming back to that when we were doing the title, when we were trying to come up with the title. We kept coming back to that. We thought, that's really what it is for the majority of the eyewitnesses. There it is in a flash of beauty, and it's gone. And typically, these sightings, the traditional, like driving down the country road sighting, it's going to last 1 to maybe 5 seconds. The longer extended sightings are really rare. And so it also, the idea of flash of beauty also kind of pulls into the whole context of the mystery of the universe. And it really is a beautiful universe. And when you start getting into some of the things that some of these people have seen, whether it's Bigfoot related or UFO or anything else, there is a sort of a mystery in the beauty. And there's also, getting into the character of Bigfoot themselves, there's also a beauty in who these beings are. We've found many, many stories of humanity with them, empathy, with, vast intelligence, with senses of humor, curiosity. And so that's really kind of how we arrived on that title, is we wanted to kind of have something that, not only did it attract attention, but it kind of encompassed the whole picture.
All right. Anything to add to that about the title, Tobe?
Well, so often when you talk to a witness, they will use the word flash. It flashed by. I saw a flash of black. I saw just a glimmer, a glimpse of it. And so it's the perfect description for the typical type of sighting that there is. Although there is the more atypical sighting, and flash of beauty takes on a whole different connotation, and we can talk about that later. But generally, it's these short little glimpses at a magical world that's supposed to not exist that people describe.
Hello, friends. Chris Matthew with Forbidden Knowledge News, here with a special announcement. We are starting production on the Forbidden documentary. That's right, we're breaking out the camera, lights, microphone, and hitting the road. This is going to be much bigger than your average conspiracy doc. It's going to be a conspiracy docu-series. And we're going to take all of you on the road with Forbidden Knowledge News, as well as all your favorite guests that have appeared over the years, authors, researchers, scientists, whistleblowers, contactees, fellow broadcasters, and some of you listening as well. The topics will include paranormal, ufology, historical conspiracies, hidden ancient history, current conspiracies, spirituality, cryptids, and much, much more. We're going to visit sacred and spiritual sites and places of high strangeness, and hopefully visit with as many of you along the way as possible. This project is currently completely self-funded, and we're asking for your help. We are going to jump into this head first, and hopefully the universe and maybe some of our amazing audience will help a bit. If you'd like to get involved with the production, email me, forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. And if you would like to help by leaving a donation, we have a Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal option. You can go to supportfkn.com or click that PayPal link in the description. Any amount is greatly appreciated and will help tremendously. And if you make a donation through supportfkn.com, you're going to also get access to select chapters from Cory Hughes' upcoming book about the JFK assassination, Be a part of an epic journey of discovery and truth with the Forbidden documentary. Right. Now, let's kind of, like I said, as much as you can without giving too much away, but I want to break down some of the paranormal aspects that people have reported. Of course, I've done plenty of Bigfoot shows with Bigfoot researchers, and I've heard your traditional, of course, it disappears into nowhere. The tracks just stop. They've been seen with orbs. They've been seen around UFOs. They've been seen coming in and out of portals. All these strange things that seem to connect it to either paranormal or something otherworldly. That's what really draws me in. And maybe we could start with, is there anything besides what I just mentioned that you learned or heard about during this process?
Brett, you go ahead.
That's a tough question. I'm trying to think if there's anything that you didn't mention. Not off the top of my head. I think that one of the surprises to me, to us, I guess, the collective filmmaking group of us, was the gifting aspect. And the gifting aspect is really fascinating to me. And originally it was going to be in the first film, but we decided to put it into the second one because it becomes so personal. And Tobe's had a lot to say about this, because this is going to be a major storyline in the second film. But how they're able to really kind of get into your psyche and match the gift to your personality is not unlike opening a present from your parents on Christmas morning as a child. I mean, it's really, really interesting. And, I hate to even use this word, but sometimes it's even cute. I mean, I don't know how else to say it.
Right.
I think Tobe would agree with me.
Mm.
What I love about the gifting, and what we didn't expect to discover, was we're dealing with playfulness here. We're dealing with something that has a desire to communicate with us. I mean, it's like the shy little boy that lives next door that, rings the door. He wants to play. He rings the doorbell and he takes off. He's too nervous. So that part of it was really endearing to us. And at the same time, there's folks out there that would be kind of like, well, they're reading my mind and leaving me things that I was thinking about the other day or whatever. That's kind of odd, but it's never in a malevolent way. And that's what we loved about it. So I think that's going to be, as we get into that detailed in the second film, I think people are going to really, really love that.
That's great. That reminds me, I was scrolling through Facebook, and one of my friends, I wish I could remember her name, was showing pictures of this gifting, but it was actual rock sculptures of, she believes it was supposed to be a kind of like an effigy or something of her, that made out of rocks. And I found it fascinating, and it looked cute, like you said. Anything to add to that, Tobe, about gifting?
Well, yeah, beyond the experiences that you talked about that reach into the supernatural, gifting is one of those things. But as Brett was saying, these are gifts of significance, gifts that have to do with individual people. And so we talk about, we try to coin this new phenomena with new words to try to understand it and get along with it. And one of the things that my girlfriend said is almost like they tailor-made a suit just for you. And so this idea of the tailor effect, where something is so tailor designed for a specific person, a specific time, and a specific place. And there's so many examples of that from this property in Cottage Grove, where you would just be astounded at the accuracy of the delivery and the jokey nature behind, some of the behavior that would be exhibited. For example, one of the stories I tell on the podcast, so I don't feel like it's saying too much, is that the property owner's wife, Cindy Adams, who is a doubting Thomas about the phenomena, especially the fact of the amount of activity that was happening, said, well, if they're real, why don't they leave us a chunk of gold? And I had my 14-foot camper parked on this property. And it wasn't more than a couple of days later that we're standing on the patio looking out over my camper. And on top of the vinyl awning was a gold object sitting on top of the vinyl about 7 feet up. And so we had been used to objects arriving on top of this elevated surface. And our tradition was that someone would catch it, stand at the edge while I lowered the awning. It would roll in. It was kind of like a game of Price is Right or something crazy, like a little carnival fun thing. And down rolled an old vintage rifle casing, brass, not gold, but brass. And it was those kind of little things that just pointed to at least in my mind, a sense of irony, a sense of humor. They were being playful with a desire and a wish. I think they knew exactly what she was asking for. But if that story, which, that story is true, but for the people listening, that sounds incredible. But I want you just to believe that story is true for a moment. If that story is true, it changes everything about what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with something in between the layers of humanity. They've elevated way beyond that because they've got irony. And if they have irony, they have a whole host of other human attributes just like us and far beyond us, because they've managed to elude us in great numbers, because these are not rare. The Sasquatch are not rare at all. My buddy Rich Germeau, who used to be a sheriff here in La Push County in Washington State, he told me that in an interview, and I just he's absolutely right. I mean, they can't be rare, not with the amount of people that Brett easily discovered on his own. I mean, he's probably had so many interviews that he has to turn down at this point, now that people know he's making a proper documentary. But these are not rare things. It's rare to get someone to talk about it. That's the problem. It's rare because it is such a gimmick, and it just sounds so ridiculous to say you saw one. But it's so much cooler than Bigfoot. So much cooler than Bigfoot existing.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on with how advanced these beings are. Maybe not technologically, but spiritually, consciously. I believe they're highly advanced entities. And earlier you alluded to maybe some kind of psychic communication that these beings emit. They give you feelings that you shouldn't be in certain places. And I've even heard reports of actual psychic communication with some of these entities. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what do you think about that aspect of it, Tobe? Or
that's
go ahead.
Oh, okay, Tobe.
About them getting in your head.
The communication,
sure.
We're speaking to how advanced these are. If these guys have psychic communication, I'd say that's pretty advanced.
Yeah. Well, there's signs for things that push you out of the woods, or push you out of their zone. It could be something like infrasound. That was my first step in 2005, is understanding that, killer whales and lions and elephants can all use infrasound to basically stun and immobilize and mess with their prey. And so that was a great explanation. I get that. But the problem is that whatever's happening here messes with individuals. It can single out individuals in a crowd and decide who's going home, or who's going to throw up, or who's going to get in the fetal position, or who's going to start drinking again. And I don't know of anything natural in the woods except one thing that can do that. And I've watched this happen. It happened around 2012 up in the woods after we found this significant trackway in Cottage Grove, Oregon. And I watched grown men cry and say they have to get rid of their guns. They don't want me here. I can't walk I can't walk past that rock, that kind of stuff. And so if that only happened one time, then I would just say, well, obviously these people have undiagnosed mental disorders, and because I could still hike, I could still do what I needed to do. But no. This happened more than once, and it's a common thing. I mean, if you can get the security of the witness and actually unfold all of their experiences, you will hear these stories time and time again. And maybe the severity of them will change, but generally, they always have the upper hand. In fact, it makes me think there's no coincidences in the woods at this point, which is so crazy when you think about the Patterson-Gimlin footage. But maybe that was a gift. Maybe that was just a straight up like business card. Like, okay, let's get the ball going here. I don't know.
That that the look that thing gave was kind of like, hey, take this one. That'd be great. Anything to add to that, Brett, about the communication or the feelings that people get out there in the woods?
Yeah, so we do get into the second one quite a bit. We, like I was saying earlier, we had there's a story about these two guys, older guys in Southern Oregon who had an experience and with an adult and juvenile, and the rest of that night they were out there camping. This is north of the California border by just a few miles. They're out there camping all night long and really felt like they were getting these messages in their heads to leave. So we're going to talk to them a little bit. We also interview a woman named Tara Harris who talks about her psychic connection to them, which is super interesting. And Tara's story is phenomenal. Tara's also based in Cottage Grove. And she never had an interest in Bigfoot, and she would go out into the forest to do clearings for spirits. And one day she turned around, and in the flesh, he's standing right there. And Tara kind of said under her breath, "Oh, wow, you're real." And she was able to begin a psychic connection with them. And that's really fascinating how that develops. So, and I understand that happens quite a bit across the country. I mean, Tara is definitely not the only one that has this ability to communicate psychically with Sasquatches, with Bigfoot. So it's a real phenomenon. We haven't had it happen to any of us yet, but we've definitely had the strange feeling, the vibe, if you will. And one of the times that we were filming Tara in the Owl Moon Wilderness, that was one of the thickest kind of feelings that we've ever had. Like there was something observing us within maybe 100, 200 yards. So we've kind of, even in the short amount of time, we feel like we felt it a little bit, that just kind of energy in the air.
That psychic connection, it's a little bit like a tuning fork, and you have to have the right person with you to kind of get that connection going. So, I've had friends along the way that, I probably would have never hung out with on an average day, but activity would start when I would go out in the woods with this person, and it would happen for a whole host of other people, like, oh, they're a Bigfoot magnet, and everybody would say it. And this Tara Harris is one of those people. So I'm not surprised that, that happened. And the stuff that you were able to capture on film while in the presence of her is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think this is a generally benevolent phenomenon? And I've heard very few accounts where people are reporting aggressive behavior from these beings. I've heard maybe one or two, like kind of sort of not attacks, but maybe they lunge towards them aggressively. But overall, they seem to be just pretty benevolent, wanting to do their own things, and maybe warning you not to get too close at times, maybe being a little protective. What are your thoughts on that? Either
Tobe,
way.
You want me to
take it there, and I'll.
Okay. The question is do I think that they're straight up benevolent?
Mainly benevolent, or is there a duality? Maybe some aren't so benevolent. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, they have a humanity to them that's uncomfortably close to ours, and so you get that spectrum, and I think that's why people straight up disappear periodically. I mean, you have rogue people in this world as well. I don't think they're all Harry and the Hendersons. I think that's a foolish idea. There's other things that happen in the woods besides Bigfoot that are just as strange. and they seem to all coalesce. So maybe Bigfoot gets the blame more often than they should. But certainly, given the fact that they have such the ambush upper hand, I could see there being things that are super nefarious, if not downright evil. But that's no different than us. And I think there's probably consequences. I've interviewed witnesses that say, oh, there was a rogue one, a gal named Connie Gwinnett, who had an extended experiencer, talked about her rogue Bigfoot and how there were consequences from another clan for this rogue individual, and how, that basically that rogue Sasquatch is not going to be a problem anymore because they took care of it. So unbelievable stories, but not every flash is a flash of beauty. Some of them are flashes of straight up terror, and we've got those interviews as well.
Right on. What do you think, Brett?
I think they're just like people, and we look at human beings and the atrocities that human beings have committed over the history of modern humanity, and you could easily say that we are pretty malevolent ourselves. And the reports that we've heard from folks talk about clans, basically living near Mount Adams that are more benevolent than the ones that live near Mount St. Helens, which are more malevolent, and so on and so forth. There are certainly, beyond a shadow of my doubt, certainly benevolent ones out there that want to know more about who we are as humans. They want to teach us. They want to be a part of us, be a part of our culture without giving themselves up, if you will. So, in my opinion is that they really are just like people. I mean, they can be as good or as bad as we are.
Now, going back to their communication, we've had reports, like we said, of this telepathic type, but also of kind of strange chatter amongst themselves and different noises that they appear to be making. You think they have a spoken language as well?
100%, absolutely. It seems to me that for the most part, it might be a situation where in some areas of the country, speak a language more so than others. And the reason I'm saying that is just because of all of the documentation Ron Moorhead has gotten in the Sierra Nevadas with Sierra Sounds. And we talked to Ron in the film, and people in the Bigfoot community are very familiar with Ron and his work. But people outside of the Bigfoot community who we are also trying to reach, I think, are going to be awestruck by those recordings that Ron got in the Upper Sierras. I mean, we're talking way out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, these are not tourists. These are not people monkeying with them, so to speak. And then we talked to Scott Nelson, who is a former cryptolinguist, naval cryptolinguist. And Scott listened to the recordings and he breaks it down. And he's like, whatever is saying, making these sounds has got an enormous lung capacity. And this is not something that a human being can vocalize. So yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's going to be a lot of folks out there, if they've never heard these sounds, they're going to get the chills, because you just kind of know innately, I think, when you hear the chatter, the samurai chatter, they call it, I think you just kind of know that it is some sort of a language. It's pretty fascinating. But the other question is if they can talk to each other, through telepathy, then why have a language? So I don't know. It could be more of a clan kind of a thing. It could be maybe they're trying to talk to us. Who knows? It's a giant mystery.
Anything to add to the language aspect, Tobe?
Yeah. I often wondered whether or not they use language when they're in their full physical state. And when they're down here, they have to abide by those principles to a certain degree until they do whatever they do and go away. Those are little flashes of beauty, right? And so I think whenever you do hear language, which we are fairly certain that we have language recorded from the Al Moon lab, that they're in a group of one or more. There's at least two. And I think that's what may be required for communication to begin. Recorders seem to be the way to go. Cameras are a no bueno for them. We don't have permission to get cameras out and deploy them for whatever reason. Yeah, you can get happy accidents and, you know, but they seem to interact and communicate and show off to some degree with the different types of sounds that they can make, including language with a recorder. We have, you know, evidence in this book that I wrote where you can actually listen to the audio as you read along, or you can watch the video that we shot as you read along through these QR codes. And in some of those points, the Sasquatchers are right there picking up the recorder, or you know, near me when I'm sleeping and I have the recorder outside, and there's just no hesitation. And so whatever that comfort level is between those two devices, I don't know. Certainly there's vocalization, and there seems to be a language, and it does smack of a language as soon as you hear it. I mean, when you listen to Ron sounds, you hear intonations and inflections. In fact, one of these things is called a terminal ending, which is you listen to Ron sounds, and at the very end of it, you'll hear a decisive huff or a stamp of approval that I made my point, and here's this huh sound. That's called a terminal ending. Now, animals don't do that. They just have their instincts to go off of, not to the degree with these morphine streams where you can sit there and study them as being some kind of language, which is what Scott did. But the research has not even been started on Bigfoot language. I mean, it's only Scott alone out here really running, you know, by himself with only Ron's sounds to work off of. And that needs to be more of a decisive effort. And there probably is, I mean, in some underground bunker, but we don't know about it.
Yeah. Do you think that this is going to be more acceptable in mainstream science anytime soon? Have you seen any other further interest in it, or people kind of lessly scoffing at it in recent years?
I personally think yes. I think that, and that's one of the reasons why we decided to do the documentary, was the soft disclosure that's coming out with UFOs. It wasn't that long ago when UFOs were a complete tinfoil hat thing, and that's changing big time, and it's changing rapidly. And we want to ride those coattails, you know, because people are really concentrating on, you know, are we alone in the universe? Well, you know, we're asking the question, are we alone in our communities, in our wildernesses, in our forests? I mean, these beings could be our cousins, you know, most likely are our cousins to a certain extent. But, you know, that opens a whole nother question. I mean, are these things more important than extraterrestrials? You know, and so I think that there's such an abundance of evidence and credible eyewitness accounts that I truly feel like Bigfoot is a stronger case almost than UFOs, just because of the close proximity that people have had to these things, and the amount of sightings that happen. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there's going to be a major kind of a sea change coming in the next couple of years. I see it happening now.
Anything?
I mean, if that kind of possibility with the UAPs and you know, them going before Congress and having open discussion about things like whether or not they have off-world materials or secured off-world materials, how to handle UFO discussion boards or vlogs, and whether or not people that have UFO discussion board or vlogs or YouTube channels or websites should have to abide by certain rules to talk about UFOs. I mean, they're taking it very seriously to the point that they want to punish people that aren't carrying the narrative for them. And I don't believe that it's a truthful narrative myself. I think they've known and know much more than they're saying and are lying through their teeth. The same way I do about the Bigfoot stuff, because they have to know. You have an undocumented illegal immigrant running through the woods right now that has eluded you and taken over your resources, doesn't have a permit.
He's not paying taxes.
Not paying taxes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Right. And, this is real forensic data that has been collected through the years. I mean, one of the people that is in the documentary is a guy named Henry Franzoni, who is a straight up scientist out of Washington and studied Bigfoot for, most of his adult life, but got paid over $5 million to go study Sasquatch underneath Mount Hood with a guy named John Glickman. And these are hardcore scientists that were funded by, the government to do it under the auspices of studying deer or mule deer or something, but they're looking into Bigfoot evidence. So that's a known study. I wonder how many people right now in the Bigfoot community are been co-opted, that have other agendas and are sitting in these conferences, taking good notes, basically trying to steer a narrative. I forget the guy's name in the UFO community that did that for a living, but
Doty?
Yeah, Doty.
Doty.
Right. And caused that poor guy to commit suicide.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So is something like that being done in the UFO community? Well, people are going to think I'm crazier than they already do. But yeah, I think there are people out there that are agitators of this community and trying to steer a narrative. Now, maybe one of those narratives is Bigfoot's a killing beast. Don't go in the woods. We don't want you to flee to those natural resources. And I think there's a good reason why they would do that, especially nowadays, since they're trying to keep people in cities and tiny little homes. But regardless, who in our community is pushing a narrative that there's scary thing out in the woods? And maybe we should start looking in those areas and say, okay, what's actually happening here? Is this what the witnesses are saying most of the time? In my case, no. They're not saying that this is a big, scary, undocumented illegal immigrant in the woods. They're saying, no, these things are leaving. They're fleeing. They're running as fast as they can in a flash to get as much distance between us and them. And that's the narrative, is that they come in at night, typically do their thing, which is very gamesmanship, either by leaving you something or playing with something. And I think the government knows all these details. And yes to your question, I think they do know.
Yeah, I've had plenty of discussions about the infiltration and deception going on in the UFO community, and that's a whole nother show. But I think you're spot on with that. Now, before we get into how much does the government know about Bigfoot, do you think there is any possible connections to ufology or beings from space or different dimensions or anything like that?
My answer to that real quick is I'm not sure yet. So I'm going to pass it on to Tobe.
Good answer.
Yeah. Well, there's a crowd. And so, I used to say it's like going into the Star Wars bar. You never know who you're going to meet when you go out Bigfooting. It could manifest with a strange light. It could manifest with something walking behind.
Oh,
I think you cut out there. Yeah, you cut out that for about 5 seconds or so.
Sorry, am I back?
You're back.
Yeah. We last had you in Mos Eisley.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Mos Eisley. Yeah. So as I was saying, you never know who you're going to meet at the Star Wars bar, and I think it's a lot like that when you go Bigfooting. So it could be a lot of cross pollination with other, what I would call paranormal type beings, be it ghosts or UFOs or lights. Is that connected? I don't know. Maybe these window areas have, entries and openings and exits at certain times. Someone explained it to me like, a flower blooming. It only does it during a certain time of year. It only does it during a certain time of day. And as that flower blooms, things can come and go. But there seems to be a connection.
I want to talk about an aspect that's recently been brought to my attention a couple of years ago. I think it was Tony Merkel I had on who spoke about this kind of Bigfoot Men in Black group, where they're not like your traditional Men in Black, but they're more kind of outdoorsmen type, and they immediately show up for people who have seen Bigfoot sightings. And I'm wondering if this is a thing, if you've heard anything about this, or your own information on government knowledge about Bigfoot, or even involvement, things like that. What do you think?
So I don't want to get too deep into this because we have a pretty significant section on this in the film, in the documentary. And I don't want to give too much away, but we have an Army intelligence analyst who was willing to come on camera so long as we put him in disguise and disguise his voice. And to answer your question, yes, absolutely, 100%. And this gets right back into the government controlling these things, and he gets into reasons why that make a lot of sense, especially for the Pacific Northwest. It's happening. I don't question him. We vetted him, did background checks on this guy before we put him on camera. It was important to us. Everything that we put into our film, we wanted to make sure that we felt was legit. So yeah, it's strange. It's real. And they're out there. The mercenaries, the snipers are out there. No question about it.
I don't have a smoking gun. I mean, what Brett has told me has kind of been enough for me because I suspected it to be true, but I don't have a smoking gun. I don't have any contacts. I mean, I have some prior military that are interested in the subject matter. I have other friends that are like over here at Fort Lewis in Washington that say it absolutely doesn't exist. That Fort Lewis doesn't have any Sasquatch on it, which that's crazy to me because I've heard all sorts of good Sasquatch reports from that area. But I don't have any information on that. I wish I did.
Right. Well, man, I can't wait for this. For the audience, when and how can they get this?
So Flash of Beauty is going to premiere on Tuesday, May 31st. It's going to be on a bunch of different VOD services. Right now, it's available for pre-order on Amazon and iTunes and Vimeo. But if you've got a favorite, Vudu or Google Play or whatever, chances are it's going to be on those platforms. And it is going to be available, as far as I know, worldwide. I've already seen it for sale in the Amazon UK store. So if you're not in the United States, don't fret. You should probably be able to get a hold of it. And if you can't, visit our website, contact us, bigfootdoc.com. And if you've got stories, send us a story too. We'd love to hear it.
Right.
Also, we have a world premiere. I'm actually here in Forks, Washington, usually home of vampire and werewolves. But Sasquatch the Legend Gift Store and Museum is having an event, and Flash of Beauty is going to have a world premiere on the 28th and 29th. What time again, Brett? Is it 6 p.m.?
5:30 or 6, both nights.
Be here at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's a bunch of speakers here as well. It'll be a good time to come up with your own theory. There was a recent sighting just down the road a couple of days ago, I think, off of 101. And so world premiere here in Forks, Washington.
Right on. Well, I'm going to have you guys back on when you can give away some more secrets, man. This was great.
Yeah.
Looking forward to the premiere. And any ideas on when the second one will be coming out? Or you got to wait and see how this one goes?
I mean, it's going to come out. That's about the best I can tell you.
Right.
We're actually under contract to deliver it, so it's definitely going to come out. we're aiming towards 2023 right now. We know that people are going to be anxious to see it, but we want to make sure that there's plenty of time for people to see the intro, if you will, Bigfoot 101, kind of, before the second film comes out.
Great. Well, either of you have any more links or sites you'd like to talk about before you head out? Any websites, social media, all that good stuff?
If you want to skip ahead to part 2 a little bit and learn about the Al Moon Lab, my book's out. It's called The Al Moon Lab, A Paranormal Experiment. You can find it anywhere books are sold. And like I said, it's an experiment and an experience in itself because it has these QR codes embedded in it. And so you just take your phone and it takes you to the actual day where that chapter is talking about. So as we find the tracks, as we find that rifle casing I talked about earlier, you can actually see these things unfold on camera or hear the audio.
Great. Well, guys, that was fantastic. Like I said, I'll have you back on for sure in the future. We'll get some more secrets out of you guys.
Great.
Yeah,
thanks,
we'd love to come back.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, that was fantastic. Until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening, and we'll be talking again Sunday. We'll see you then.